Hello everyone. Welcome. We're going to just get started, just making sure everyone has been able to enter the meeting. Welcome everyone to a special joint session for this UN 2.0 week. It's a joint session between UN Human Rights and the Council of Europe. And we are looking at behavioral science today. Thank you very much for joining us. As you know, this week is dedicated to building a more agile, efficient and forward-looking UN and showcasing what we can do to get there. So today we're going to hear about behavioral science in 2.0 and specifically, how it can drive impact for human rights. So the UN Human Rights Office and the Council of Europe have recently begun to explore how to collaborate on behavioral science. And so we are looking forward to delving into that a little bit more with you today. My name is Lena Konstad. I am Internal Communications Officer at UN Human Rights, and I am looking forward to be your host for this discussion. We have a great lineup for you today, so let me introduce our speakers to you right now. First, I'm very happy to welcome Mathieu Maury from the Council of Europe, who is Secretary General of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. He will give us some opening remarks on the potential for behavioral science in human rights. After that, we're going to see two short video addresses, one from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, and the other from the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, Michael O'Flaherty. And we'll follow that with two presentations from those that are actually applying behavioral science to human rights work. We have Pia Oberoi from UN Human Rights, who is Senior Advisor on Migration and Human Rights for the Asia-Pacific region. And we also have Natalia Vutova from the Council of Europe, who is Social and Behaviour Change Lead and Head of the Council of Europe Office to Georgia. Towards the end, we'll have some time for Q&A with our presenters, and we invite you to add your questions or comments in the Q&A tab as we go along. You can pop them in there at any time. Note that it's not the chat itself, it's the actual Q&A tab, and that allows you to react and to upvote questions that we see what are the questions most people want to hear about. So we're looking forward to a interesting session, and thank you for joining us. So Secretary General Maury, thank you for joining us and welcome. I'd like to start with you and hear your opening remarks. So over to you.
Thank you, Lene. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you and to be given this opportunity. Maybe I should start by saying a few words about the role of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities within the Council of Europe. We are one of the two political assemblies of the Council of Europe representing the voice of local authorities, and our mission within the Council of Europe is to make sure that all the work of the institution in protecting human rights, the rule of law and democracy takes into account the reality and needs of European cities and communities. Our second role is to disseminate the standards of the Council of Europe to local leaders. We do all this by making recommendations to cities and to the Committee of Ministers representing our 46 member states, by monitoring the implementation of local democracy in our 46 member states, by observing local and regional elections, by providing legal advice to our member states, and by implementing a great number of cooperation projects. Of course, the Council of Europe, like every organization, wants to be always more agile and result-oriented. For this to happen, we need to embrace innovation, including applied behavioral science. So, of course, when Natalia Vutova, our social and behavioral lead or guru, really, came to see me at the start of my mandate 2 years ago, I was more than happy to try and apply this methodology to the wide-ranging work of the Congress. As I said, one aspect of our work is to make sure that our 46 member states abide by the provisions of the European Charter of Local Self-Government, the convention that lays down standards for promoting local democracy and protecting the rights of local authorities, affirming their role as the first level for the exercise of democracy. It's a key instrument based on the principle of subsidiarity and a reference document in Europe in the promotion of democracy, and one of the few treaties of the Council of Europe ratified by all its 46 member states. In the current challenging context for democracy, rule of law, and human rights, the optimum implementation of these core rights for the citizens needs to be supported by innovative approaches with the help, namely, of applied behavioral science. For citizens to enjoy their rights at local level, reinforcing the system thinking and approach is key, as this ensures the inclusiveness of all stakeholders to ensure optimal solutions in accordance with the principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. The Congress of the Council of Europe has embraced applied behavioral science in its technical cooperation activities as an important part of its efforts to innovate. Through applied behavioral science, we are getting a better understanding of the needs, motivation, frustration, sometimes fears of the end users of our actions, the citizens. With the help of the applied behavioral science, we ensure that citizens are fully on board when defining their challenges, needs, and aspirations through co-design and co-creation. The Congress has for now been implementing such type of activities in Georgia and in the Republic of Moldova. Applied behavioral science also helps us reinforce the human rights approach in our actions with the principle of no one left behind. Moreover, we believe that behavioral science should be integrated within a system of multi-level governance and evidence-based behavioral insights embedded in the policy design and implementation. This will foster citizen-centric solutions to challenges we are faced with. The system of multi-level governance provides each level of authorities with their share of responsibilities, their own competencies and resources. It's a key principle in reaching the goals of the 2030 agenda, and the Congress stands firm in supporting local and regional authorities in taking the lead in these endeavors. When democracy is under threat, when large number of citizens are disengaged, when deep disturbances of the political and social systems are the new normal, institutions like the Congress play an important role in maintaining the community engagement of the citizens, and applied behavioral science is definitely here to support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Maury. It's always important and insightful to hear the bigger picture and in the context and what behavioral science means in that. Grateful to have heard that. We're going to move now to our video addresses. So we're going to start with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk. And in his video address, he talks about the potential impact of behavioral science for human rights. I don't think we have sound. Maybe we have to just reload that one more time.
Colleagues, distinguished participants, the people I have spoken to from across the world in my time as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights have expressed a deep desire for human rights to be respected and protected. Incorporating behavioral science into our human rights work is not merely an academic exercise, it's a pragmatic step to making tangible improvements in people's lives. With its nuanced understanding of human actions and motivations, behavioral science holds tremendous potential to address some of the most entrenched challenges we face by unpacking the cognitive biases that lead to prejudice. We can design interventions and responses that promote empathy, respect, and equality. By improving our awareness of human behavior and decision-making, We can strengthen our outreach to those calling for a seat at the table, including young people and others. And by identifying the behavioral barriers that prevent marginalized groups from accessing their rights, we can develop more effective and equitable policies. So it's really about mindfulness in all that we do. My office is in its early stages of bringing behavioral science to scale, in collaboration with the UN Behavioral Science Group. But we're already using some of the lessons of behavioral science in Asia and the Pacific, for example, where it is informing our efforts to change narratives on migration and to counter discrimination and to reinforce human dignity and rights. Internally, my office is also launching a behavioral science initiative for an environmentally sustainable office to help colleagues learn about our digital carbon footprint and its impact on our environment. Dear colleagues, building on the excellent work being done by UN practitioners in this emerging area of behavioral science, we look forward to embracing this interdisciplinary approach. Rather than react, we can respond proactively and preventatively. We can tap into what unites us rather than what divides us. Together we can build a future where human rights are for all, everywhere. Thank you.
All right, let's move to our next video. We're fortunate today to have also a video address from the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, Michael O'Flaherty. So let's load that up now and show you.
Hello. As Commissioner for Human Rights, it's my job to support Council of Europe member states to do a better job of upholding human rights. What tools do I have? Well, I don't have a police force. I don't have an army. I don't have some way of insisting on compliance, respect, and obedience. What I have is persuasion. In order to be persuasive in my job, I am every day invoking so many different disciplines. And within them at their heart, the discipline of psychology. I'm seeking to find ways to persuade the other person, to change a mind, to bring about that difference. I'm using behavioral sciences, but by and large, I'm doing it in a sort of a unstructured way. And that's why I so very much welcome the investment in a focused look at how the behavioral sciences can work for human rights that lies behind this event. I was involved in one such previous structured effort in the context of communication, how we can do a more effective job of delivering our messages so that they bring about a human rights change. We learned a lot. We learned, for instance, from the cognitive scientists about the different value systems operating in a person's mind and how certain values speak to some people and not others, and then it's the other way around for other people. Some people respond well to invocations of justice. Others, for example, to invocations of security. We can work with that cognitive science insight in order to persuade two different groups in the various settings and contexts. Now, from my one structured experience of engagement with behavioral sciences, I learned three things. There are three takeaways. The first is that people like me, lawyers, cannot do it alone. We have to sit down together with the cognitive scientists, with the psychologists, and all the relevant other disciplines to forge the way forward. So it's interdisciplinary. The second thing is that we very quickly enter into ethical minefields. We have to be so careful in the engagement with persuasion that we respect the absolute privacy and right of opinion of the other person. We can't trick the other person, and so ethics comes to bear. And then the third, and probably the most important thing of all I learned, was that it's one thing to understand the role of the behavioral sciences, it's another to deliver it every day in our work. That's not intuitive. That takes time and effort to change old habits. And again, that's why what you're doing is so important, and I wish you all the very best for these hours together. Thank you.
All right, great. So I think that last message there summed it up really. It's about understanding and delivering, and understanding how we deliver. So Now we are excited to go a little bit deeper into the practical applications of behavioral science in human rights work with our two presenters for today. And I'm pleased to welcome our first presenter, Pia Oberoi. She works for UN Human Rights as a senior advisor on migration and human rights for the Asia Pacific region. And just before we get on to Pia, just a reminder to please, add a question or comment in the Q&A tab. We'll gather up a few of those towards the end to ask of the presenters, so you can upvote and comment on those to see which ones are the ones that resonate the most with colleagues. But for now, thank you, Pia, for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Lina, and it's a pleasure to be here. I know we have a packed schedule, so I'm just going to go ahead to talk about embedding behavioral science in UN human rights. And to start with, the understanding that I think all our previous speakers have told us, that bringing about human rights change is ultimately about changing human behaviors. And this is the starting point for the work that we're doing on this initial journey. We're at an early stage in our journey, but that's what we're trying to do. We start really by embedding behavioral science into our theory of change. And you'll see, of course, that we go through the various levels from the individual up to the policy environment, focusing really on our toolbox. And for us as human rights actors, we have a range of tools that we use. And what we would like to do is infuse behavioral science into a multitude of the tools, so we get to effective protection systems at the international level, at the national level, and encourage states to uphold their obligations under law. We start really through our toolbox by considering individual behavior within broader contexts. And this would enable us to diagnose the barriers that prevent people from adopting certain behaviors, to understand enablers that help people achieve their aims, and to design and measure the impact of interventions. As with all UN 2.0 quintet areas, we take a use case-centric approach to define needs and to build capabilities and enablers. And you can see how we're centering these use cases. And today I would like to focus on two projects that are underway, but I should note that we're also advancing on integrating behavioral science in other areas, such as program design and organizational effectiveness. And we're happy to talk to you about some of those throughout the conversation today. So the first use case that I'd like to speak to relates to the Stand Up for Migrants pilot campaigns that we have run in the Asia Pacific region, leaning very much on some work that we've done around understanding narratives in the context of migration, through putting in some discussions that we've had with experts on narrative change to really understand how we can build better, more welcoming narratives. Now, the problem specifically that we confronted in countries in the Asia Pacific, Australia, Malaysia, and India, to be more precise, were that at the time that we were investigating the issue, public narratives on migration tended to be unwelcoming. This was leading to discrimination and other negative policy outcomes for people on the move. So what we were trying to do within this inquiry was, through a mixed methods approach, to understand a target audience's behavioral barriers and enablers, and then through that understanding to roll out messages to the wider public on building welcoming communities. We went through and developed an 8-step methodology, very much leaning on the work that others have done before us, and very grateful in particular for local partners. And you can see some of their logos on the slide there, who we worked with to roll out, these 8 steps. And we also have a instructive guide that we put together, very much recording our journey. And the guide was launched last June in 2024 to provide support and inspiration to civil society partners, but also a range of stakeholders who might be interested to follow the same journey that we did. I'll take you very quickly through a few of the steps, but of course, most of them are detailed in the guide that's there on the screen. So in terms of the behavioral science inquiry, after we did contextual research and reached out to key informant interviews, we ran a series of quantitative surveys in the three target countries. In Australia and Malaysia, we had about 1,200 respondents. In India, we had over 2,000. And we targeted these surveys really to questions around understanding a movable middle or a persuadable audience. Also engaging, making sure that the surveys were targeted regionally in terms of the local languages, and particularly in India, it was a complicated, big country to reach. So we undertook some pre-quantitative cognitive interviews to ensure that the questions were targeted. In this step, we reached through a series of questions around a Likert scale. We understood the particularities of an undecided middle, what we call a persuadable or movable audience. These reveal that about half of Australians, so 57%, 2/3 of Malaysians, half of Indians are what we call in the undecided middle. And what we then did was seek to give an identity to this audience so that we could reach them in a more granular and a more effective way. So you can see on your screen some of the categories that we developed in Australia and Malaysia, and then in India, where we our segment one was what we call the apprehensive supporters that could be targeted in different ways, depending on their apprehensions or then their willingness to display an openness to other communities. So through this process, we were able to get a much more segmented understanding of the audience that we wanted to persuade, if you will, on the value of welcoming. In a further step, we then developed messages and went towards how we could test these messages. And I should say that throughout this journey, it hasn't been a linear path. We were learning as we went along the way. And so, for instance, in Australia, we A/B tested a message through a quantitative online survey to come up with one message that tested better around welcoming people from other countries. In Malaysia, we ran a moderated platform through a qualitative engagement with people that corresponded to our target audience. And similarly, in India, we ran a series of digital community engagement outreach to understand what the sentiments of the audience might be and where the messaging might land. And finally, in the final step, we had created campaigns that were rolled out in different ways on social media in the three countries, and you can see there on the screen some of the impact that we were able to measure. For instance, in Australia, we learned that a large proportion of the target audience were more likely to engage with topics relating to migration or migrants' rights, having viewed the video messages. And I should say that we are also currently embarking on a second phase of the Dari Dapo campaign that was rolled out very, very closely with local partners that led really this initiative in Malaysia. And we will be shortly starting a baseline survey of public perceptions to measure attitudinal shifts since phase one, but also to deepen a grounded expertise in making behavioral change happen. So we very much see these initiatives also as taking on a life of their own, particularly working with local partners. So I just wanted to stop there before going into the second use case, which is to say that while we see behavioral science for human rights as integral, we understand also that understanding and addressing human behavior plays an integral role in making human rights change happen, but behaviors don't happen in isolation, and change is not only about the individual. And of course, as human rights actors, we're very familiar with the systems. We work within systems of vulnerability, trying to understand systems of power, engaging systems of exclusion. So a systems approach, which is linking very much with the behavioral science lens, focuses on the fundamental rules, interactions, and behaviors in a systemic whole. And we started on a conceptual journey towards combining systems thinking and behavioral science to understand and address complex problems. And I'll take you to one of those in just a second. But really, based on the idea that system thinking moves us beyond siloed approaches towards interventions that connect the dots between the structural, the individual, and social factors, enabling scale and depth so that we can locate individual behaviors within structural contexts within which they arise, and we're able then to target both rather than one or the other. So the second use case that is currently in development that I'd like to take you through is very much the example of what we would call a wicked problem. It's the situation, and we have a report that we put out in 2023, if you would like to read it, of a large number of people, hundreds of thousands of people who are being exploited in scam centers across the Southeast Asia region. The methodology that we chose, and the image that you see on your screen, is really our first attempt to put together a systems map, because this enables us to visualize the issue, and we also can very kind of concretely visualize and visually center victims in this map. But also that it helps us to problematize common assumptions within the anti-trafficking space. For example, the assumption of ignorance, that victims of trafficking behave as they do because they lack knowledge. And this in turn allowed us to engage with evidence that suggests that simply providing information often fails to translate into sustained behavior change. As our High Commissioner had noted in his opening address, this problem is entrenched. And so we felt and do feel that we need new diagnostic tools to enable them to see the complexity of the map. Through this systemic lens, we can engage with the contextual enablers of individual behavior, such as more broadly the role of socioeconomic distress or existing deficits in migration governance in driving recruitment, understand feedback loops, identify leverage points, and from that move on to a more holistic idea of the problem. So, for instance, a feedback loop could be that frontline authorities are required under law to detain irregular migrants, so they're making them more likely to see them as criminals. So that's a negative feedback loop. And what we are in the process of doing now, and I should say that we're taking inspiration also from some recent guidance that has been issued by UNICEF, that we are looking at a particular behavioral inquiry at a leverage point focused around prevention. So the point that we want to ask is, why are people being recruited into these cyber scam operations? It has been more than 3 years now that the international community is well aware of the issue, but we still see this as that people are being recruited. So we are currently devising a systems thinking workshop in collaboration with Behaviour Works Australia, which is based in Monash University. And we hope to involve stakeholders at the macro, meso, and micro levels to create an understanding of cause and effect within the system, enabling us to validate and develop the systems map that you see in front of you, focusing on a leverage point for a behavioral inquiry into the barriers and enablers to prevent recruitment into these scam compounds. We hope within this workshop to build a more fleshed out picture of the system structure, that is what is in the system, as well as the interaction, so the relationships between different parts of the system, moving then to co-design policy pathways and behavioral change interventions. So just as an example, while we are refining our systems map through a dedicated workshop that I mentioned, we are currently embarking on mixed methods research that is trauma-informed, because we will be working with victims and survivors of trafficking, into the recruitment pathways. So we are linking, as you can see on the screen, OHCHR's established methodology for human rights monitoring, and there you can see some of the qualitative elements of it, where we would be asking open-ended questions to our survivors around their experiences in the scam compounds, but also specifically about their recruitment into the situation of exploitation. And we're linking that with a quantitative analysis of motivations and drivers, so that as a whole, we can reach behavioral insights through looking at capabilities, opportunities, and motivation, and using journey mapping and deductive analysis to understand the drivers of this behavior. And we hope to complete this work by early 2026 and to have some flash reports that relate to the situation along the way. So I will stop there, but very much welcome any thoughts and guidance that any of you might have as we embark on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pia. Fascinating to see the way that you are using this behavioral science approach in these two different projects. Now I'm very pleased to welcome our second presenter and special guest from the Council of Europe. Natalia Vutova is the Social and Behaviour Change Lead and Head of Council of Europe Office to Georgia. Thank you, Natalia, for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Line. Distinguished participants, if governments, international organizations, CSOs and academics are serious about addressing the current challenges and threats that democracy, human rights and the rule of law face, they definitely need to have a thorough understanding why people act in the way that they act, why they make the decisions that they make, where their frustrations and motivations come from. So indeed, to have a reasonable chance to successfully fight disinformation, civic disengagement, discrimination, or gender-based violence, you need to have behavioral science on board. That's why the Council of Europe have been promoting applied behavioral science, social and behavioral change internally for close to 2 years. And the way that we did it, we used different avenues. First of all, we got the buy-in of key figures at the Council of Europe. You just heard the address of our Commissioner for Human Rights, the Secretary General of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe is a great supporter of applied behavioral science at the Council of Europe. We have also the support of our Deputy Secretary General, Director of Human Rights and other high officials, including the Director of Program Coordination. Furthermore, we have carried a number of trainings, internal trainings for our colleagues in order to expose them to social and behavioral change, to applied behavioral science. Around 400 colleagues have been trained online and offline out of approximately 3,000 of colleagues we have working for the Council of Europe. And we had trainings such as introduction to social and behavioral change, use of social and behavioral change in technical cooperation, social and behavioral change for impactful awareness raising campaign, or behaviorally informed theory of change. We have also identified external consultants to work with us on different initiatives, and we have acquired a detailed understanding of the expectations of donors when it comes to embedding social and behavioral change in our actions. We have also paid a lot of attention creating synergies with other international actors. That's why I'm so happy that we have this established cooperation now with the UN Human Rights, and we're looking forward to continue this cooperation. And last but not least, we have put in place a regular presentation by external speakers from academia, practitioners for the Council of Europe Community of Knowledge. And the title of our presentations are called Behavioral Science and Beyond. So let me give you some examples of areas where applied behavioral science, social and behavioral change have been embedded in the actions of the Council of Europe to ensure that the citizens' perspective is taken on board and that the citizens are part of the solutions. We have a publicly available online course now on change management in the justice sector, where we have streamlined different aspects of behavioral science. Furthermore, judges and lawyers in the Republic of Georgia are provided with trainings to ensure a better decision-making from the perspective of behavioral science. With the help of behavioral science, we got a better understanding to the barriers of a wider use of alternative to pretrial detention in Republic of Moldova, and to look how these barriers can be overcome with the help of applied behavioral science. We're also happy and proud that we started working with the largest nightclub in Republic of Georgia to promote anti-discriminatory practices embedding applied behavioral science. Finally, we support the integration of displaced population in Armenia to have an easier for them access to the acquisition of citizenship, taking in behavioral science on board. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Great to understand a little bit the organizational change that's needed in order to put the behavioral science concept into practice. All right, so we have some time left now for some questions and answers. I saw there was a request in the Q&A for the reports referenced by Pia, and I see that she has shared them already. But please send in some more questions that you would like to hear about, maybe more details about the projects that were mentioned or other approaches. So while we're waiting for more questions to come in, perhaps I wanted to ask from Pia, perhaps on the migration project that you were talking about. Of course, it's a topic that's relevant in so many areas of the world, and how transferable, if I can use that word, this method you think would be to other places, and if that is something that you've considered or will look at further. And for Natalia, maybe if you could maybe give us a little bit more details around the justice sector that you mentioned in Georgia, and the judges and lawyers, and how they apply now these principles. So maybe Pia first, if I could ask.
Thanks very much. That's an excellent question, Lina. And of course, as you'll see, even from the 3 countries that we chose, they are in very different stages, both, in terms of their kind of development space, but in terms of, where kind of the intractability of the hostility or the unwelcoming attitudes come from. And indeed, actually, while we were going through this process, for instance, we had a government change in Australia, which kind of really changed a bit the landscape. It changed a bit the partnerships that we could have with the government authorities in terms of rolling out some of the campaign work. So in the first place, I think it's eminently transferable. The methodology itself is eminently transferable. In 2 of the countries, in Australia and Malaysia, we actually ran the campaign deep in the weeds of COVID and the pandemic-related restrictions. So a lot of both the research as well as the campaign development was carried out online. And in India, for instance, we expanded a bit the scope of inquiry to not only look at migrants, but also excluded communities that were conceived within, a space of xenophobia or hostility to minority communities. So again, and this is kind of, I say this all the time, is that from our perspective, behavioral science offers a diagnostic tool that can be applied to a range of human rights issues, and of course, a range of countries. In fact, probably every human rights issue that we can think of would have some behavioral science element built into it, because, as we said, we're talking about changing human behavior. The only restriction, I would say, is, and for people thinking about what to do with it, is a resourcing restriction. We kind of built it as we went along, because we're a tiny corner of the UN, as we know, and we have limited resources. And also the partnerships. One of the reasons that we decided to write the instructive guide was because we felt in our particular region that there was a need to bring the civil society actors and national human rights institution actors on board with us to share what we had learned about the methodology. In other regions, CSOs and NHRIs and other stakeholders are well advanced on some of these inquiries in any case. So we would have a different role. But to end by saying, I would see this as completely transferable and in fact something that we should be working on in all regions. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent. Natalia, a little bit more about your project.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, as our commissioner just said, lawyers cannot be alone if we want legal norms to be implemented. We need to have really an understanding of behavioral science, of human psychology. That's why we, when we work with judges, lawyers in Republic of Georgia, we work first of all on the biases that they have, as all human beings have biases. It's impossible to debias people, but it is possible to make them aware of biases. We also work with them on the values, on their system of value that they have in order to ensure their independence, their human-centered approach. And currently, we're also starting a system of making sure that the evaluation of the trainings that we conduct are behaviorally informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I see that we have a few questions in the Q&A, so let me see. So one talks about the ethical considerations of behavioral science that the Commissioner of the Council of Europe mentioned in his message. And how do you each ensure that behavioral science interventions in human rights are ethically sound and don't unintentionally reinforce harmful norms and power dynamics? And then we have a couple which look a little bit more at the long-term lasting effects. Do you consider that the effects might also be long-lasting or sustained effect requires constant intervention? And yeah, what strategies have proven most effective in securing long-term institutional buy-in for integrating behavioral science into human rights work? And let me see one more that just came in. The use of behavioral science in relation to change management exercises. I think you quickly referenced it, Pia, in the beginning, but also if the council has any experience in that regard. Maybe Natalia, should we start with you and then move over to Pia?
Yes, I will start with the ethical considerations. Of course, I mean, it's an excellent question, and we're looking into that whenever we conduct awareness-raising campaigns, especially when it comes to anti-discriminatory practices or fight against gender-based violence, because it is true that campaigns can actually reinforce harmful social norms. We know it now from experience, from studies that have been conducted, that actually when you have a campaign which says that 7 out of 10 women are subjected, I don't know, to gender-based violence or sexual violence, actually you're reinforcing social norms that there are so many people who are have this kind of behavior, so this is socially accepted. So we work on positive messaging. We work on making people aware of their biases, and we are also looking into ways to make sure that whatever actions that we conduct, they're ethically approved. But this is an excellent question. Thank you for that. When it comes to how to ensure the sustainability of embedded behavior behaviorally informed practice. I think this is the problem that every behavioral scientist that works in the field of human rights or public policy faces with, because system thinking is the must. You need to start with system thinking. You need to involve all the actors that that you have. You need, most importantly, to involve the citizens, because the citizens they need to be part of the solution. The citizens who are exposed to the problem, they have also the solution. They might have partial solution, but when you look at it in a systematic way, this is how it works. And you have to have them on board in order to implement that. And of course, the most difficult aspect of what we're doing is to have all state actors, non-government actors on board. And very, very importantly, I think it's very visible from what Pia just shared with us. Context is key to what we're doing, because something can work in a context and most probably will not work in a different context. So as international organizations, we need to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Pia. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm just trying to go through a few more, just on the institutional buy-in, I should say, and my colleague Jessica is online as well, and please do jump in, Jessica. But we have been, kind of what I would call, I guess, a small internal community of practice, been trying to develop a roadmap which would kind of set the strategic framework and direction for OHCHR's work on behavioral science. And I think that this is something that we've been learning as well from the Council of Europe colleagues, in terms of how we can build that buy-in, but also the necessary knowledge, the skills, the expertise to apply it in different areas within the OHCHR's theory of change. So I think that that's something that is probably a useful kind of starting point. And just to go back to the point around the ethics, I mean, I think from OHCHR's perspective, and certainly the work that we've been trying to do out there in the field, is to build and rely very much on the methodologies for human rights work that we've built and refined over decades of doing human rights interventions. So, for instance, I mentioned that the research that we want to do around barriers and enablers of trafficking drivers builds and is very much rooted in a monitoring methodology that is trauma-informed, that is ethical, that is principled, and that we have experience of doing. Where I think, and again, this comes as well back to the question around measurement, the added lens that something like developing a systems map, and it's not just the development of the systems map, I think, as Natalia very rightly pointed out, and the whole systems thinking methodology relies on participation. And as a human rights actor, that particularly interested me because, of course, from a human rights perspective, you need to deal, you need to understand participation and empowerment, non-discrimination, accountability, all of the elements of a human rights-based approach. So developing a systems map through engagement with stakeholders at all levels is something that we need to do. And the implementation for us and the ethics, in a sense, for us are also built into where these feedback loops, for instance, exist. So in terms of a do no harm principle, we need to understand if, as Natalia said, if there is a feedback loop where you're actually kind of, reinforcing a negative behavior or reinforcing a negative outcome, that would need to be examined and probably eliminated, in a sense, from your intervention pathway. There was a question as well about measurement. And I think that that's, one of the things that, again, for us as human rights actors, we're very familiar with the idea that human rights change takes a long time and is not a linear process. So measuring small incremental changes, what are called tipping points, for instance, is something that again, we're quite familiar with. There was a question, I think, linked into donor funding cycles. And frankly, this is something where I feel that we need to as well bring the donor community along with us and to say that we're not going to see from A to B maybe a great shift within a year. But once we're measuring that we're on the right pathway, and again, as I said, going back to the example that we have in the Malaysia context of the campaign that we're running, once we managed to interest a donor in, an additionality to phase 1 of the campaign, we're going to go back and measure attitudinal shifts and keep that measurement going in a medium term. So I think that there's, ways in which we're not starting. I think this was for those of us, including myself. I'm not a behavioral scientist in any way, shape, or form. I've been, working on human rights from a legal and policy perspective for all my life. But what attracted me to behavioral science was that we're not starting from scratch when we're doing it. We're just deepening our analysis of human behavior, whether that be at a very individual level, or then scaling up to making targeted recommendations in a policy space and things like that. So that's how I would approach, kind of some of this entry into behavioral science, if you will.
I think it resonated with me what the Commissioner for Human Rights also mentioned, the analogy with communication, that communication is something that we all do, and you can do it in different ways, and there are some ways that are more effective than others, and that behavioral science maybe also is one of those things that, you do it a lot intuitively, but a little bit more structured and organized way, it goes a bit further. Natalia, there's a question for you in the Q&A. If you're able to share more details on the research you mentioned from the nightclub in Georgia.
Yes, I know this is usually, like a case study that we have. It usually, provokes a lot of interest. We are at an early stage of working with the nightclub. We are at the stage where we are elaborating the questionnaire in close coordination with the management of the club. So in order to have the baseline studies for us then to conduct the actual actions. So once it becomes more public, I will happily share that with you. And I think there was another question about the change management, right, at the Council of Europe. At this stage, as I said, we are embedding behavioral science in change management in the justice sector, in the public sector, because you conduct change management in the public sector differently from the actions that you have in the private sector, because you motivate people in a different way. You cannot motivate them with salaries, with bonuses, but most importantly, in the public sector, you motivate them with meaning, with mission. So now we are doing it at the level of the justice sector, but I really hope that we will be able to do it internally at the Council of Europe in order to ensure that the change management that we're having is also supported by behavioral science.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to add?
Yeah, and maybe I saw that there were some questions about the lasting effects. I mean, Pia very insightfully mentioned that the measuring is very important when it comes to behavioral science. It's very important for the citizens. It's very important for governments, for donors as well. And oftentimes when you try to convince people to take behavioral science on board, this is one of the first questions that appear. So from my experience, it's absolutely possible to measure the effect. In social sciences, even a small effect is considered as an effect. In behavioral science, we usually first go for the low-hanging fruit and then amplify the results. So it takes also a lot of exposing our donors and our partners to behavioral science to create this belief in behavioral science.
Thank you very much. I think we are at the end of what we had time for today, allowing also colleagues to move on to all the other sessions that are happening in 2.0 week. So let me please thank you all for participating. Mathieu Maury, Secretary General at Council of Europe for Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Commissioner for Human Rights at the Council of Europe, and of course to our two presenters, Pia and Natalia. Thank you very much. For all the colleagues online, please do stay in touch. The recording of this session will be available on the UN 2.0 website. Join our network. We'll put the link in the chat and keep the conversation going. Really, we saw that there aren't also answers to everything yet, but it's definitely an ongoing conversation. Thank you very much for joining us and for being part of the journey, and enjoy the rest of the UN 2.0 week. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.